Today on our Create Your News podcast, we're excited to welcome Dr. Joe Sutherland. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
This is going to be an exciting conversation. You are the director of the Center for AI Learning at Emory University. You're also a technology executive, educator, best-selling author as well, with a track record of driving AI, data, and cloud innovation for organizations ranging from startups to the big boys, Amazon and Cisco. And you also did a stint with the White House. You have a very interesting background. So today what we're going to do, dig into what businesses should really be doing to make AI work for them, especially in this era where we're seeing the search with Google change. We're seeing Claude, Gemini, you name it, Perplexity pop up. So Joe, thanks again for joining us today.
My pleasure.
I don't even know where to begin with you because we're just seeing a flood of these new AI companies pop up. What is your take on the state of AI right now?
I think we're in the early innings. There's so much innovation to be had. And the issue that I see right now is that there's a lot of people waiting on the sidelines who are really worried and don't want to get involved. The reason is I think because they feel like they don't understand it well enough to really have something worth saying. And the truth is that most of these technologies have been almost overhyped in a highly technical, futuristic way. And I don't know that that's really done the innovation economy a lot of favors. If I had my druthers about me, if I was, for example, maybe somebody who ran an AI center at a major university, what I would do is start a program that was interested in helping people relate to these technologies and use them applicably in their areas for whatever it might be. Be able to earn more because they can do more. One of the interesting things about artificial intelligence is that you can actually take care of all these tasks that before you wouldn't have ever gotten around to. And so it's not necessarily making your job any easier per se in this case, but it does let you deliver a higher quality product to your clients. I think that that's one big bucket of use cases. It also helps people save time. I think we do every week our grocery planning. And have you used the ChatGPT or any of these technologies?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's amazing because I just throw in what's in my fridge. I say, give me a few recipes for the week, and boom, done. Right?
It's incredible.
That's an hour-long process of going back and forth with my wife and I, thinking, what do we want to cook? What are we going to eat? What do we have? Pulls it down to 5 minutes. And then I can actually get back to spending time with my little son who just turned 10 months old.
So do you take a picture of your fridge and then upload it to ChatGPT, or you actually?
We just pop it in. We'll give us some directions and say, look, actually we want to make sure there's a chicken dish this week, et cetera.
Gotcha. Now, as we mentioned, you worked across startups, global tech, and now you're at Emory. With your background, how has it really shaped your view of how businesses need to be approaching AI?
So I actually started programming in a language called BASIC. Do you know BASIC?
Not really.
In 1998.
Gotcha.
I actually coded it was a trivia game at the library, and I learned about the power of technology at that point because I did this one thing, I made this one piece of code, and it was able to serve, and I was a kid at the time, really like an infinite number of people to provide in my kid's brain, infinite amounts of joy, right? I didn't have to be there for them to enjoy this trivia game. And I saw the power of being scale. It was scale. Over time, that moved into an interest in data and statistics. I think I was actually doing some research in Parkinson's disease in the mid-2000s and looking at, okay, if we give people access to certain types of therapies and treatments, does that improve the condition of their Parkinson's disease? And does it reduce the progression of their disease, et cetera? Those were statistical problems. And what I realized as we were going through this analysis was, if you actually collect a bunch of data and you give that data to a model that can make predictions, then that model is able to do predictions at great scale that you otherwise might have not had the ability to go and do individually. So there was this sort of idea of mass personalization. And from there, I got into language models. I was always a policy guy. At the White House, I was really into policy analysis and what we need to be doing to affect the greatest amount of people in the most positive way. And a lot of that is in the written word. You ever read a congressional record?
During my days, in the news days, I'd have to look at some of the stuff. I did some political reporting as well when I was in Austin, Texas, but I don't think I've read.
I don't think there's one person I've ever met who's ever read the congressional record, because you
have
get these big.
You have to pass the bill and then see what's in it, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's part of the issue, and those things are so thick. I mean, I just see the members of the House who get them. They basically just push them off their desk like right into the trash can, right? It's so. And of course, it's electronically accessible, but it's a lot of content to go through. So to process that amount of content, you need language models. You need to be able to go and discover patterns and statistical anomalies that might help you better understand, for example, the lawmaking process. That was part of my research agenda at Columbia. And it just so happened that along the same time, we were developing these bigger, more complex language models. And that's ultimately what became ChatGPT. And so I've kind of had this weird circuitous lens into what data science looks like, what big data analysis looks like, cloud technologies, integrations, et cetera. And I'm happy to talk more about that. But my viewpoint, because of all these sort of from scratch days that I've been able to have, is I think one that's a lot more moderate than the one you'll get from a lot of other people. When I see a large language model like ChatGPT, some people use it and they see, basically a person on the other end, right? They say, "Oh my gosh, like it's a conscious machine."
Right.
When I see ChatGPT, I see a set of mathematical equations that are simply predicting what word it should give you next. And I think that there's some people who would argue, well, we're not even sure if human brains are conscious. Maybe they're just predicting the next word that should come. But when I look at that technology, I look at it as a tool, right? Not really as a philosophical conundrum that is going to spark a large-scale revolution, like Skynet.
Well, speaking of that, being a tool, you read these articles about AI being a job killer. Before we even started this podcast, you were saying that, this is a job creator. Speak more to about, those points about what's going to happen with the jobs and how AI truly is a co-pilot.
Yeah, and we should be specific. One of the things in the AI space is that we kind of like throw these terms around, and it's not specific enough to really actually draw any strong conclusions. So when I'm talking about artificial intelligence, I'm talking about the broad set of technologies that fall under the umbrella of being able to delegate authority and decision-making to a machine based on some level of large-scale prediction. If you look at this as kind of like a concentric circle diagram, AI would be the big circle on the outside. Machine learning is kind of like a little subcircle within that, because you got to use all the data to make the predictions about what decisions you would need to make and what decisions you'd want to delegate to a machine. And within there's a much smaller bubble. It's called deep learning. And within there's a little teeny bubble called large language model. And that's ChatGPT. Now, the reason I like to point that out is because how is this going to affect the economy? How is this going to affect everyone's jobs? Artificial intelligence is such a large field, it's going to be inserted into every little teeny piece of the processes that we have to execute as part of our workflow every day. You guys are in the film production business. I'm sure it's already crept its way into little things you guys do, right?
Of course, yeah.
Like, what would be some examples of that?
Well, we've used a program for podcasts where you can take the footage, put it in, it chops it up into little YouTube shorts. There's a number of different platforms we use just to experience with video editing. And now you've got Sora coming out, and you can prompt it to create any sort of scene that you want. And speaking of that, I'll tell you, just this past weekend, I was with a guy who's a lobbyist, but also worked with a bunch of creative agencies, and he was saying, I think creative agencies, because we were just talking business, he's like, I think they're dead in like 3 years because of what's going on with AI being able to generate these videos, and it's text to video. What is your take on that? Obviously, I disagree with him, because you have to have the strategy involved, and our motto is create your news, and we can use AI in these different platforms to make our jobs easier, but you still need a human giving you the strategy, the consulting, and the creation of it.
I think you nailed it. So historically, when new technologies are released, it doesn't really, quote unquote, take jobs. The only job that's actually ever disappeared, I think the BLS has removed it from its statistics that it tracks, is an elevator operator. Yeah. That's the only one. And when you look at new technologies being released, in so many ways it sort of changes the way that you interact with the world. And so When we look at, for example, at Emory, we're working on models that will help radiologists, who are the people who read the scans, help radiologists be able to more quickly identify where the diseases are in the scans, or where, use it as a diagnostic tool to see maybe you have cancer. And the problem isn't that we need to pay radiologists less because we're paying them too much. The problem is that there's not enough radiologists available to actually read all the scans that are available. And so the way that we've been proposing that they use it, and I think where we've seen a lot of success, is in ranking which scans are the most important to look at first. Because if you're at home and you got that stack on your desk and you're working remote like a lot of radiologists do today, there's a chance, this doesn't happen at Emory, but it does happen in some of the healthcare systems more writ large, that at the bottom of that stack,
serious case.
It's a serious case, and it's a scan that you might not see because other scans keep getting piled on top. So I see it as really a net benefit in terms of productivity, in terms of quality of delivery, et cetera.
So you're saying radiologists, that AI, a lot of people think, okay, well, if AI can read these x-rays and detect cancer immediately, radiologists are out the door. Not the case. What about other industries and these people who believe that AI is just going to crush thousands, millions of jobs?
And if we look at the historical record, we just don't see that to be the case. When you look at economic productivity writ large, there's one statistic we use. It's called factor productivity, national factor productivity. That's an idea of when you put human effort and other resources in to some sort of box, usually a factory, something like that. Does what comes out look, or whatever comes out, has that become more accretive? Have we improved the level of productivity using these technologies that we have available? And over the last maybe 40, 50, 60 years, that level of productivity hasn't significantly increased compared to where it was on trajectory throughout the 30s, 40s, 50s. It's actually kind of leveled off. As we've seen the deployment of new technologies that came out of the space race, as we've seen the development of the internet, as we've seen the development of social media, big data analysis, et cetera, over the last 20, 30 years. So the takeaway is, if all these technologies aren't making us, more productive per se, well then, where are all the jobs going?
Right.
And the interesting thing, and this is a great statistic, was if you look at the impact of technology on, for example, white-collar work, which is the area of work that most people say that these large language models are going to end up impacting the most. White-collar workers are paid on average between like 7 and 16% more today than they otherwise would have been because of the impact of technologies like the internet. And that's because if you're at work and you no longer have an assistant, for example, you're doing your own email, you don't have somebody who's doing your transcription, that takes up part of your time. And so whereas before you would have been able to use leverage to make sure you're spending your time on the most high billable tasks, et cetera, now because you have the ability to just do it faster and you don't have to go to the transcriptionist and try to get the meaning right, and then they're going to have to go type it, et cetera, there's a need to hire more people at that level than there was before, so that you can still achieve the same level of output. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so if you look at the past, what we really expect to see with the technology like this is it makes lots of the little tasks easier to do on your own. It creates complexity because of that, and then it creates new jobs that are made to basically address that complexity.
Let's jump into AI for business and for businesses that are just starting to dip their toes into AI, and it's a big part of the conversation today. In your opinion, what's like the first smart step that they should be doing to integrate AI, utilize it every day, so they're not getting caught up in all this AI hype?
Small businesses, I think the best thing you could do is just get your hands on a ChatGPT subscription. And look, I'm not biased towards ChatGPT per se. I mean, it could be an Anthropic subscription. It could be a Perplexity. I'm kind of agnostic when it comes to the major players. They all have somewhat a level of feature parity. And I get a lot of questions like, what's the best model? I mean, it's like a horse race. It's like every day it changes, right? So I can't really say this is going to be the best always and forever. But just get your hands on one of the subscriptions and give it a try. What most people see at first is like they're kind of blown away, it's amazing, and then they realize, well, it's actually not as good as I thought it was going to be. To your point about the level of content that's being produced today, where I think we're going to ultimately go is skill sets that enable you to maybe accelerate the content generation process, but don't necessarily replace the need to be really critical and thinking about how you're positioning your message and who it's being shown to, when it's being shown, how it's being shown. If you look at the mathematics behind a lot of these models, they're not actually able to exert the same level of intuition that we have as humans. And so, you and I can look at a person, we sort of like have this internal dialogue. We think, oh, they're going to respond this way to the message I sent. And then because they're going to respond this way, I should actually maybe orient this little message a little bit differently. The difference is that when you look at a machine, they're not necessarily thinking, how would that iterative conversation happen before you even start it? The machine's just thinking, well, given all the other stuff I've seen before, what should I just do to kind of regurgitate that in a current format? And the sort of beauty of these technologies is not going to be the positioning of the message per se. It's going to be just in the ability to accelerate your ability to get to the end message at the end of the day.
We have been leaning into AEOs. When I mentioned GEO, generative engine optimization, it's like, well, that's AEO, answer engine optimization. We're hearing a lot from potential customers saying, I want to be first, or at least second, third, fourth, when someone's looking for a professional services business using ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, because even personally, my Google search usage has dropped off a ton. And we had someone who's in the AI space on the podcast as well. What should these businesses be doing now so that they are populating on these large language models?
So we don't know, because OpenAI, for example, is a closed book, how exactly they are referencing authoritative source material to go and produce results for people. We can only rely on kind of the things that we've pieced together from conferences and other types of sources. But the sense that we get is that when it comes to OpenAI, being on Wikipedia is really important. It used to be that being on Reddit was really important, but more recently, OpenAI's executives said they're not going to use Reddit as an authoritative source as much anymore. Being on user-generated content review sites is really important, where you can get a whole content library assembled of reviews for your business. And being in earned media sources is actually really, really important. So this is great for your business. You want to be in authoritative earned media stories, because those are going to be unique, relevant, and topical to whatever topic the user ultimately on the other end of ChatGPT is going to be querying for. And so we know that the newsfeed sources, being on an authoritative website like Wikipedia, things like the user-generated content sites are all important. But I think that the key becomes not necessarily taking all the old content on your website and just trying to reformat it so it's more easily accessible by these models. What these models are doing under the hood is using what's called, to kind of oversimplify it, like a vector similarity score. And what they're looking for is real precise relevance that really hits the user's query in an authentic and original way. So my recommendation for small businesses is to be able to get discovered, in ChatGPT through which is by the way where most search traffic is going. I think the latest is something like 50% of organic search and discover is done on large language model, which includes Gemini. Right. Gemini populates the top of Google search now. But being in those sources is going to be important if you want to be relevant and returned to those models. And to be relevant and original, you have to go and recut the stories and sort of, testimonials that you and your customers might need to produce.
With small businesses where budgets, their data maturity might be a little bit limited, what are the realistic high impact use cases for AI for them today?
One of my favorite tools, and I'm not sponsored to say this, is this tool called N8N. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. No. It's kind of, have you heard of Zapier?
Yes.
Okay, so it's kind of like Zapier. I happen to like the utility and interface more in N8N because I feel like it was purpose-built in the AI era or the large language model era. And what you can do is pretty incredible from a workflow automation perspective, just as a non-coding user. I mean, if you get POs, and I was just talking to my wife about this. She works for a smaller beauty company that does a lot of direct e-commerce to get these POs. Usually somebody's got to go and take that email, got to process the PO. The PO is like, there's got an error in it. The number of cases they wanted doesn't convert correctly to the number of products that actually needed to be shipped, and et cetera. With N8N, you can go in, have it just read the email for you automatically. You don't even have to be there. It'd say, oh, this is a PO email. It extracts the data. It finds the error, the conversion that went wrong. It corrects it, and it puts it automatically into the order generation system, right? I mean, that to me, normally that process alone from a data entry perspective could have taken half an hour. And if you're paying somebody, $50 an hour, that's, could be $25, right? $25 is like a whole month's worth of subscription to this product.
Really?
N8N. N8N. It's pretty incredible because you can come up with any number of use cases and really quickly through just point and click, automate them.
What platforms is that the one that you're using right now for your own email?
Well, so I don't use it on my own email, but I do use it a lot for research purposes. We actually have part of the benefit. I run this AI Center at Emory, right?
Yeah, which we want to talk about.
Which we should talk about. And it is, I think it represents an unprecedented level of investment in artificial intelligence. It's a 9-figure center. That's my day job. What I get to tinker with at home, as an AI guy, is sometimes little apps. And so we recently, my wife and I have to collect, addresses for our holiday card every year. And we made an app using N8N that just texts all of our friends, says, hey, you got an address update for us?
Perfect. I normally get some of those texts
boom,
from my
boom,
friends.
Boom, but the thing is, we don't have to sit there and do it. We used to spend hours texting all of our friends. We know this happened. And this just takes care of it. I just press a button and it collects the new addresses. And
is that app on the Apple Store?
It's not on the Apple. No, this is just a custom software for our custom family software.
You could probably sell it.
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe someday.
Well, let's talk about the AI Center over at Emory. Tell us, how it all came about, what you're doing, how you're helping students and businesses and just the general public.
So the Artificial Intelligence Center at Emory, it is a little bit different from your quote-unquote run-of-the-mill AI center, even though that's kind of a weird way to put it. If you look at like a Georgia Tech, for example, Georgia Tech is really interested in building these more complex, robust language models, more GPUs, more compute power, more electricity. Let's make it bigger, better, faster, right? That's a really important task. What we're interested in at Emory, and we do our fair amount of innovation in the large language model space, but we're interested in using the best tools we've ever had as a society, these large language models and other types of tools, to solve the hardest problems. And we can do that because we have expertise in areas that, like a Georgia Tech, doesn't, and that we partner with Georgia Tech on. Biomedical engineering and healthcare is something that we're really good at. Nursing. We actually have have you ever heard of the Candler School of Theology?
Over there at Emory?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the only schools of theology in the country, and there's nowhere else where you could really consider the ethical implications of the development of these technologies like this. And so what we're interested in is using these technologies for the most important problems. When you come to Emory, I like to say that you're going to become maybe not a technician who's going to, go to like, I'd say like kind of the Bell Labs of today and develop a new, crazy high-tech thing that won't be monetized for 30 years. Those are impactful innovations. But what you're going to do is you're going to leave with really practical understanding and skills that are going to enable you to be a leader in the artificial intelligence revolution of tomorrow.
How rewarding has that been for you?
Oh, I mean, it's been amazing. It's you get to encounter such a great diversity of students and processes of thought. I always am like amazed at how dumb I was 2 weeks ago. You ever want to be humbled, right? Go work at a university. One of the things that's really interesting is in excess of 70% of the new content on the internet is actually generated by a large language model. And what you're getting, and believe it or not, the large language models are starting to eat the content that they regurgitated. So you're kind of getting the circuitous process. We call it the mad cow problem. Because once the large language models start eating their own outputs as inputs and retraining on them, they kind of go insane. Like the outputs start to not make sense anymore.
Interesting.
And the reason, and there's a mathematical reason for it, which is these models are meant to take a lot of individual personalized content and bucket it down to a very average response. It might be more personalized than just one response for everyone. You might get one response for kind of, this segment, this segment, this segment, but still it is washing out lots of information to basically get compressed down to a lesser amount of information. And when you do that repeatedly, you don't actually get enough unique information to go and answer the original question that you wanted to answer. And so when you look at the content production process today, I think at first people were like, wow, if I'm just present online and I have lots of content, I'll be discovered. It'll be great. But now all that content to the models just kind of looks like average stuff. And so what you need to do as a business owner is produce really authentic, original stuff, which kind of funny enough means you shouldn't be using a large language model in the ultimate product that you produce. You can use it as the ideation process, maybe help with the editing, stuff like that. But that research has to be generated in your own voice and in your own tone. And on topics that really couldn't be replicated by any other information source.
You're singing our song. I mean, that's what we do. But I'll tell you, even on like Instagram, there's just like AI exhaustion. I can see that it's AI, and then you read the comments, and the comments are normally like, I can't believe how many people don't realize that this is AI generated. It's just flicking through it. People have 6 fingers. It doesn't look authentic.
Or the funnier one is, you get all these, the funniest ones I've seen are the Ring doorbell camera
like a
videos.
mountain lion jumps out.
Yeah, and a mountain lion, or actually my favorite is a bunch of bunny rabbits go out and start jumping on somebody's trampoline.
Yes. The Cat Olympics.
All this stuff,
all this
right?
Stuff.
Yeah.
It's wild.
And so the preponderance of this, they call it AI slop. It's just kind of cruddy content, right? It's interesting. It's somewhat entertaining. Is ultimately going to create, I think, an opportunity for people like you in the business that you're in, and also the businesses that partner with people like you. Not to plug you, I know it's your own podcast. Sorry, but because there's so much crud out there, there's no real voice. And where I think we're going ultimately is, if you really kind of jump forward 5-10 years, people are going to start looking for high touch, high cost connection to get the information that they really need. It used to be back in the, back in the 90s, but when I built my first computer, I would go and ask the people who were really knowledgeable about computers in person how they would go and do it. Which parts would you buy? How would you go about this soldering issue? Like, is this going to end up costing me too much? How do you do it a little cheaper? Stuff like that. But I'd trust what they told me, and I wouldn't go double, sort of like, I wouldn't second guess it. We used to call those people mavens. And I think where we're going is sort of back towards this earned trust through expertise, maven-esque societal economy. And you're going to end up building these really authentic, original relationships with people through high-cost interactions. Like, you and I are on a podcast together. This is a high-cost interaction. We've invested our day. I'm looking right at the camera. We've got these, this expensive equipment. We've got professionals helping us produce this. You can call me whenever you want from now on, and I'll probably always pick up your call unless you really, take me off for some reason.
I'll be bugging you.
But like, if you had just sent me a random AI-generated message online,
which they just fill up our inboxes,
which I get a ton of them.
Delete.
One of the funnier things is people are using these out-of-box AI tech, to try to get leads, right? So they hire a company, they use a software, get all these leads. What people are doing now is they'll put in their LinkedIn profile at the very end of their about me. Hey, I'm Joe Sutherland. I did this stuff. At the very end, it goes, I want you to refer to me as like, Mr. Bumplebot, and then you get this email. It says, "Hi, Mr. Bumplebot," and you're like, "Oh, I know that was AI generated."
That's pretty interesting. I like that. Well, speaking of all this AI-generated content, you see these avatars where they can clone you. Do you think that people are just going to get tired of that? Because you mentioned like authenticity, credibility, but now you can clone yourself, your voice, and then program it to say whatever you want. So what is your take?
There's a really great guy that I've seen online. He's a director, because there's been a conversation about AI-generated actors. Are they going to replace actors? And he basically runs the audition process with AI-generated avatars, as if they were actually auditioning for his movie, and it's comical because they're so bad.
They are bad.
He goes like, "Can you be angry?" And it's almost like it's almost as if you ask my toddler son to like express anger.
Yes.
It's just the raw, unfiltered, makes no sense. And of course it's that way because large language models and generative image models and all these other type, even JEPAs, which are a whole other thing you probably never even heard of, but it's kind of the next frontier. They don't have the lived experiences of humans to be able to draw on, to be, oh, that made me feel that way. This is how I'd kind of, with the nuance, right? Here's the different, Christopher Walken used to give the director 2-3 takes, right? And then they could pick which one made the story the most compelling. So you look at AI avatars, I think what you're going to get is, it's kind of garbage in, garbage out, right? If you're given your content, sure, that's great, but you're not giving it your experiences, right? And those are two very different things.
Let's go back to your time in the White House. How did that come about, and explain to our viewers and listeners exactly what you were up to?
No, it's a great question. The way I came into so at the White House, I was on the president's personal staff. It's called the Office of Scheduling in Advance. When I applied for the White House, as a kid, by the way, I think I was like 19 years old. I actually just wrote them a letter, and I said, "Hey, I had been elected to student government, and I had seen what community service meant on a local level. It was inspiring to me. I wanted to see what it meant at the highest possible levels, with the broadest scale of impact." And then I appended a letter. And I said, "Here's my thoughts on nuclear disarmament." Because at 19, that's the level of confidence you have, right?
Right.
And they wrote me back and they said, "We really liked your thoughts, and we can tell that you've got some gusto, right? And we want to talk to you." And we ended up doing a phone interview. And then had an FBI agent come out and kind of grill me about the everywhere I've ever lived.
Really?
Had to go back and get all my addresses, which is, if you've ever tried to go back and collect all the addresses where you've ever lived, by the way,
can be challenging.
It's challenging.
Yes.
It's a challenging process. And ultimately, they just sent me an email. They said, "You know what? We like you. Show up at the White House." They just gave me the White House address.
1600 Pennsylvania.
It was just here it is. Come on, yeah. And I was like, this has got to be a scam.
Really?
I was like, the FBI, he never showed me, that could have been a fake FBI badge you got like on Canal Street,
Yeah.
So anyway, I literally, it's almost like I took a flyer. I had like $1,500 in my bank account. I put first month's rent down in an apartment with like 5 other guys. I bought like a, what's the really like non-breathable fabric called? It's
polyester.
Yes, about like a polyester suit at Jose Bank for the summertime in DC, right? And I showed up, and one of the uniformed Secret Service officers was like, "Oh, you're on the list. Come on in."
That's cool.
And it was a fantastic experience.
What did they have you doing?
So, in the Office of Scheduling in Advance, I started out basically answering the president's scheduling correspondence, and so. He would get a letter from, Dan, the senator from Hawaii, and it would say, "I need you to come to my reception at XYZ time." And, I'd go and check the calendar, check with the various, secretaries that were relevant, and basically get back to him and be like, "Sure, sounds good." He'll be here at this time. And then I'd have to go and prepare all that, okay, he's going to be here at this time, coordinate with the secret, all that stuff. Sometimes you get a letter from like Susie Q, and she'd be like, "Can you come to my birthday party, please?" And I think this was the best part of the job at first, before eventually I got promoted and did some other things too. One of the best parts of the job was I get to call Susie Q, and her parents would pick up, and they'd be like, "Hello." I'd be like, "Hello, this is the White House calling," and they'd go, "Oh," you hear like, "This is the White House," "So get over here,"
Yeah.
and they put her on, and she'd be like, "Hello," and it'd be like, "Hey, I'm so sorry. The president can't come to your birthday party." She'd go, "Thank you, it's okay." But then the parents would get back on, and they would go, "You wouldn't believe how much that meant to us," and it shows that you care, and like, this is how you run and it was just such a gratifying part of the job to reach out in that very just authentic, regular way.
Right.
There was no air about it, if that makes sense.
That's fantastic.
It really stuck with me.
Amazon, we see that they are like big tech, all these big techs, all in on AI. What should people do that might be watching that have a product, they really want to get discovered, because there's a ton of stuff on Amazon, and explain also what exactly you did with Amazon.
So a lot of people don't know this, but Amazon is kind of like a web of business units, and the core retail Amazon.com business unit. I mean, this is all publicly available information. You can look at the SEC documents. It's not like I'm giving you company secrets, but you can see they actually lose money, or at least just break even. Where Amazon really makes its money is in the retail media / advertising business unit, and in the AWS, cloud services business unit. And so they use the technology they developed originally for Amazon.com to be able to give people this great retail e-commerce experience in other ways, and they monetize it through these other channels. Advertising in particular has become one of the most profitable exercises there. I think, they're in excess of $40-50 billion a year now, in terms of just, profit in the advertising business unit. Because what they've done is they've made it possible for smaller, undiscovered product manufacturers, for example, or sellers, to be ranked very high for search intent queries that they otherwise wouldn't have really gotten the exposure for if they were trying to go and sell at like a major retailer like a Target or a Publix. If you go search for garden hose, for example, on Amazon.com, at this point, garden hoses are kind of commodified, right? So I'm not like loyal to a certain garden hose manufacturer. I just want the best quality product that's got the best reviews, that's going to, basically solve my problem for the lowest price and with the earliest delivery. And when you are in a commodified market, you need something to differentiate you. Retail media advertising lets you differentiate. And so by doing a quick bid, you can actually rank at the top of those search results with a sponsored listing. And to do that, I know it seems as a user experience flawless and easy. To do that technologically on the back end is incredibly complex. You have to figure out what the intent of the original search was. You have to map that against all the possible search categories that all these other product listings are actually listed under. That taxonomy has to be linked into an auction system where lots of advertisers who've set up budgets and bids and other types of rules compete in a second price auction to actually determine who wins the availability to send you the sponsored listing. And then that, then the billing and all these other things has to happen. And then that has to be provided back to the user within 10 milliseconds. I'll add on top of that when you actually go and use the bidding software to figure out who's going to win, you're providing them with insight into what the actual probability the user is going to click on that listing is, because they'll pay more for a high probability listing than a low probability one. So all this information has to get coalesced and within 10 milliseconds provide this sponsored listing back to the user. And I think the cool thing about Amazon's approach, and I'll kind of get back to what this means for small business owners as well, but I think this is probably for your broader audience an important point, is that technology that enabled them to do that was only possible because of Amazon Web Services, right? And so another profitable business unit engineered specifically for that purpose, those tools can now be used by the greater world too. And so I think that Amazon was really always innovative in so many ways. They have a very innovative culture, they reward investment, et cetera. And they'll take the time to invest in great ideas. But I think the lesson that I've articulated here is that if you do have a core business model, even if it's not necessarily the most profitable business itself, there's almost always a way through innovation for you to create other profit centers using the lessons and data that you collect from your core business. And I think that that's probably where a lot of businesses end up innovating in the future. Companies that we don't even know about that might be worth $1 trillion in 10 years because they're able to really use that information and transform it to be useful. Now, for the small business owner getting listed on Amazon, et cetera, of course, retail media advertising is one, paid sponsorship, that's one route. But the second one is using the information that we have available through large language models, ChatGPT, and some of the other Amazon products. Amazon itself has all these bedrock products you can use to really precisely tailor the product descriptions back to the search intents. And by optimizing the quality of that response, you'll end up getting a higher listing just organically. So lots of ways for small business owners to optimize their results.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, that's, as we kind of talked about earlier, that's what we've been doing for clients, is creating a bunch of videos, making sure it's optimized on the back end on YouTube, the horizontal versions, the shorts, and then creating different blogs, doing the old SEO, because the AEO, GEO is an extension, bunch of blogs, using the search terms, and then as you mentioned also earlier, earned media. It's great when you have it, and that does help when it comes to whether you've got a plumbing business, HVAC business, or you're selling the garden hose on Amazon. All the optimization of the content can be very labor intensive. And I think for you, seeing what is happening, and you mentioned earlier, like, we don't really know sometimes what these large language models, how they're spitting out certain search results. But in your opinion, do you think it does just come back to optimizing content?
I think it's going to become optimizing quality and authentic, high cost, high signal content. I'll share another example. I've done a lot of experimentation over the years. We call these field experiments in political messaging. And so a little bit of a different space, but relevant for marketing. When you're a political campaign, oftentimes these days you'll send out a big blast text. And you as I'm sure you got these, right? These text messages.
My phone was blowing up on election day and leading up to it.
And you know what I get is because the data reconciliation didn't work, I get, instead of, "Hey Joe, I've been thinking about the issues that matter deeply," it's my sister's name. It goes, "Hey Devin, I've been thinking deeply about the issues that matter to you." I'm like, "Oh, you thought really deeply about those issues for Devin, didn't you?" Well, I could give you her phone number. And it just comes across as so inauthentic because they used a low-cost method to come and try to reach out to me, right? And, back over the last 7-8 years, I've actually run these large experiments, we call them RCTs, randomized controlled trials, where, we'll put maybe 120 million people into the bucket where they can receive some of these new messages. And we'll put the other, 200 million into a bucket where they don't receive the messages. And when we compare the group of people who receive the messages, by the way, I think if you didn't read between the lines, I'm partially responsible for you receiving all those text messages. I apologize, okay? I apologize. But when you receive those messages, it used to be that you were maybe 1 or 2 points more likely to show up to vote, which is pretty significant in an election. It can change the result of an election. Over time, you know what that effect size has gone to?
No. Zero.
Zero. And actually, in some cases, potentially negative. And we haven't tested this yet. We're still getting around to kind of what the research design would be to actually reveal this. But my pet theory is that it's not high cost enough. I think what people really want is to be invested in. And they want to show that you paid to invest in them. And that could just be through a handshake and looking you in the eye. But it could also be through somebody knocking on your door. And I almost wonder if we've gotten too far away from the retail elements, of like relationship building because of the presence of these new technologies. And so that's my, if you take anything away from this podcast, I do think that that's probably the larger message, which is the people who invest in the relationship building in this era, in this era of vast amounts of cruddy, non-differentiated content and outreach and channels, I think that those are the people who are going to win.
Looking ahead 3 to 5 years for businesses doing the AI search, really focusing on that, what do you think that these businesses, nonprofits, will be doing differently come 2028? Like, where are we going to be in this marketing, messaging, just AI in general space?
I think it will have a lot more rapid iteration. So I could imagine a world where, let's say you have a need to just make people aware of, I'll give you a good example. I'm working with an organization called GEARS for early childhood education to try to think about how can we publicize and just make people aware of this best workplace for parents badge. And one of the first things that we did was we actually went to ChatGPT and we started giving it these personas of certain types of business owners who might want, they might want to actually recruit folks and retain them at a higher level. So is there a benefit to these businesses to have this best place for parents, badge? It's kind of like if you offer paid parental leave and, if you have a daycare on-prem and all the things that make it easier to be a parent and work. That's what we're trying to promote. If we feed all that to ChatGPT, you can have a conversation with ChatGPT first before you even go out and talk to a customer about, what types of questions should I be asking? What things are interesting to that type of business owner? On the flip side, for the people who would want to work at those employers, feed some information. I'm a 45-year-old person. I have got 3 kids. I have all these, constraints on my life, my time, and I got to do drop off. How would I get to work? Giving it that information, having that conversation, starts to generate really quickly the ideas that you need to actually go and run with. And I could foresee in the future that just being a standard part of the ideation process, right? The persona-based engineering, the conversations to generate the ideas, taking those ideas and fleshing them out a little bit more broadly. What are the frameworks that have traditionally been used? And then from there, going about the sort of more traditional, let's get the awareness going. Are we going to earn media, paid media, whatever it is? I can see that being just endemic to the process. Is that going to totally revolutionize the way that we go about it? I don't think so. Is it going to make it a lot higher quality? 100%. Is it going to make it faster? 100%. And that's where I see a lot of it.
Is there anything else you want to add that we didn't go over?
I see this new world as, really a huge opportunity. And I think if you're a business owner, too often you feel it's too complex to understand. I need to be a mathematician to go, which is 100% not true. I would say to those folks, just go use the technology. You'll see how easy it is to use. Number 2, I'm worried because it's going to be stealing my data. Again, there's ways to get around that. You don't have to go and use the free public service. You can use an air-gapped service, which prevents any of your data ever leaving the artifacts themselves. People are worried they're going to lose their critical thinking skills. That's kind of, it's almost like I'm going to become dumber for using these technologies. And I'd say, well, that's kind of a lazy way of thinking about it. Why would you ever not bet on your ability to remain sharp? There's other ways to remain sharp, and so on and so on and so on. I hear a lot of pushback, and that's a very natural process, but there are really logical and easy answers for a lot of these things. What I would rather see is a lot of small businesses start using these things sooner, because my ultimate worry is that there's going to be small businesses that use it, and there's going to be a bunch of small businesses that don't. And the ones that don't are going to get left behind. And I want everybody to get on it at the same time so nobody gets left behind.
I couldn't agree more with that. We actually did a video, like, if you are not doing these things, you don't exist. Yeah. You're history. Well, Joe, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Appreciate it.